Welcome to Financial Minds Meet the Experts. I'm Jamie Agostino. On this podcast, we're joined by financial industry experts to talk about topics, trends, and themes that credit union professionals need to know about. Today, I am joined by Jeremy Jenkins, VP of Data Analytics with Vizo Financial, to talk about AI and data. Jeremy, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. Before we get started, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, and I'm happy to be here. Happy to be back at Vizo Financial. I started my credit union career back in 1998 with Vizo Financial as first in the marketing department, and then worked over almost 21 years in a variety of roles at the corporate. So I have a lot of corporate credit union experience. I left Vizo Financial at the end of 2019 from the position of director of member relations or member relations director. And went to serve as the CEO at Lanco Federal Credit Union in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, here where I live, and did that for a little over 5 years before now coming back to Vizo Financial to work in this role of VP of Data Analytics. So yeah, been in credit unions. How many years does that make it? I'm not going to do the math. A lot. It's a great space to be working in, and I'm happy to be part of helping credit unions get more out of the data that they have and use that for growth for the credit union.
Obviously you've been working in the credit union industry for over 25 years, because I'm coming up on 25 years and you've been here longer than me. So that's how I keep it straight in my head.
Yeah.
So as someone who has transitioned from CEO leadership back into analytics and technology, how did your executive experience shape your views on where AI is most needed in credit unions?
Good question. Yeah, and actually, I think the answer to that would vary by credit union as far as where it's most needed, because especially in small and mid-sized credit unions, we tend to have great expertise in some pockets and maybe not as good as we'd like in other areas. Where AI would best plug into a credit union, it's going to be variable by credit union. But the good news with that is that there are so many AI-enabled solutions coming to the table that I think wherever you need to plug it in to your best benefit, there's probably going to be a way to do that. For me, when I was the CEO at Lanco, I think the two key areas I would have been most interested in would have been first our call center. In fact, we looked at some pretty great AI solutions for the call center that we never pulled the trigger on just because of the timing and the budget side of it. But more about the ability to carry the project to get it implemented. But definitely saw some great solutions there that if I was still there, I would be looking to try to bring to the table. And then the other one was around data analytics. One of our members recently that we were talking with, he said something really great, and I told him I was going to steal it. He said that we all have data, but what we don't have is information. And that is so true. It can be so hard to get good information out of the data that you have. That was something we experienced in my life as a CEO, as a credit union, and something that I would have been continuing to look for a solution to make leveraging data, getting useful and actionable information out of it better through the use of AI.
All right. You recently wrote a blog article for Vizo Financial titled "The Role of AI in Credit Unions from the Lens of a Former President CEO." In that article, you spoke about time being that greatest challenge you face as a CEO. So how can AI help reclaim executive time for strategic growth and innovation?
Pretty much by helping you offload day-to-day tasks. One of the things, and I'm sure you know this too, you've been here long enough to talk to a lot of credit unions. We often pride ourselves on wearing a lot of hats, especially in the mid-sized credit unions. Small and mid-sized credit unions is kind of something you hear credit unions say, and it is something to be proud of. It's a heritage that we have that we've been able to do more with less. And we have a lot of people in credit union space that work really, really hard to the benefit of their members. What that can translate into, though, is a focus that is, so heavy on the day-to-day that you can kind of come consumed by that, and maybe because of that, you don't ever get the time to take a step back and really put in the effort for the strategic thought and development and execution that will grow the credit union. And so, the point of that blog post was to try and create the margin of time. It was something I worked with my team hard to try to get to, and it was a struggle. But there's a lot of reading you can do on the idea that if you don't give your leaders time in their day to take a pause, reflect on strategy, focus on the vision. I always say reset their compass, make sure they're going in the right direction. That over time, over your experience, it will reduce your effectiveness. So yeah, super important to find ways to give them time. And I think that AI coming into the equation for credit unions will really create a new way to tackle that. Because in the past, if you wanted to do that, it meant bringing more people on board, and that's expensive and sometimes, frankly, cost prohibitive. With AI, you can start to bring virtual people on board. And that sounds a little intimidating at times to people, and I get that. But what I always encourage people to think about in that regard is just ask yourself the question: if I could hire myself a personal assistant tomorrow and they were already effective in doing the things that I want them to do, what would those things be? And that starts to point you in the direction of where you want to look for AI as an opportunity to get things off of your plate. Because most likely they would be some of the simpler things that tie you up day to day, and those simpler solutions are going to be quickly met with AI alternatives. So, yeah, just overall, I encourage people to think about the value of that time. Don't undervalue your time. We can wear a lot of hats, we can do a lot of things, but every one of those tasks and every one of those hats takes away time that you could be investing in the strategic development of the organization, which ultimately leads to growth.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I hear time as the biggest resource drain from everyone. I mean, all of us. I have time constraints, like I would love to have more time in the day. And, your list idea, I already got a list. I can think of things just for myself
Yeah.
where I would love an assistant to help with those things. So great tips there. So then based on your current role, can you share like success stories or ideas where AI driven automation has transformed back office functions and created operational efficiencies?
Yeah, a couple things. So, one, I'll back up to the call center. So that's not necessarily tied to my current role, but like I said, we reviewed some solutions there, and I did see one solution that it was fielding about 70% of the call volume for the credit unions that were using it, which is huge. And what was really interesting about it was it was fielding that much call volume and increasing member satisfaction scores, which was so hard for me to buy into, but it really did prove out. And it was hard for me to buy into because I'm the first person to be screaming agent or maniacally pressing zero on on my phone because I want to talk to a real person. And what was happening in this solution though was that because the AI can mimic human interaction so well, and because it has the ability to look into the entire knowledge stack for the organization and try to try to get the resources it needs to answer questions, it was actually doing a better job on the front end and for simple questions than a human agent would be able to do. And on top of that, it was very adept at knowing when to hand off to that live person without the person on the other end having to go, crazy and yell at the phone like I often do. And so, that's an example of a real time saving and efficiency and better member experience that AI can bring to the table that I've seen. And then obviously, getting into kind of the role here, our partnership with Vertus AI, kind of the short way to talk about or think about them is that they take all this data that you have and they make it actionable without you needing to hire a data scientist. So yeah, they can really streamline that process.
All right. Well, one of the issues that sometimes you hear about from credit unions is they often struggle with siloed data. So how does the Vertus AI help streamline the use of this member data?
Yeah, you're exactly right. The siloed data is a big issue. It's and that comes from a couple different things. So one can be, cores, for example, the way they store information. A lot of times it's necessarily siloed. And then oftentimes credit unions, we use third-party partners to do different things, maybe student lending, credit card lending, things like that. So there's a host of data, maybe on completely different platforms besides the core that you want to integrate. So as an example, we did a member spreadsheet that we compiled once a month when I started putting it together. And we did it just so we could get a view of what our member relationships looked like kind of across several different metrics. When I started building it, it took me over a week to get all of the information I wanted, and get it, connected into a single spreadsheet. I luckily, once I presented that to an employee that we had that was way better at Excel than I was, she was able to develop something that got that process down to about a half a day for us. One look once a month that took a half a day to produce. And it's all because you have to get that information out of multiple different sources. So if you think about that, and I'm sure this resonates with a lot of listeners, forward that into, say, a strategic conversation, right? If you haven't done that work in advance, or if you've done the work but you didn't anticipate everything you might ask of that data, you find yourself sitting at a strategic table and reaching a point in a conversation where you think, well, how many members would we impact if we did X? What do their balances look like? What products are they using? That sort of thing. And inevitably, that conversation has to stop because somebody has to take it away, go build that spreadsheet or something like it to try to incorporate all that information as they have time. Then you have to circle back and get all those same people to the table with that information to try to continue that conversation. Is usually inefficient. So where Vertus AI steps in is they do all the work of getting that data compiled, moving it into a stream that's always present, so they can take data loads even as much as once a week in an automated fashion, and bring together those sources of information and put it all into one dashboard. So now when you're sitting at that strategic table and that question comes up, at your fingertips, you have the ability to click through an easy to use dashboard to answer pretty much any question that would come from or would need member insight or data insight from your organization in real time, and have confidence that that's accurate. So it just eliminates, speaking of getting back to having more time, right? It eliminates all of that in between where somebody has to go and build or create that picture from your data to continue that strategic conversation. And again, without hiring somebody to do it, they're doing that for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you walk me through like a case, a use case where Vertus AI is helping with these operational efficiencies at credit unions?
Yeah, of course. So one of our credit unions, they're on a solution already, and they were talking with myself and with the folks at Vertus about wanting to grow loan volume, and shared kind of some of the struggles they've had with that. And because the solution gives you the ability to drill deeply into your own data, it becomes very easy to segment your membership and move on with personalized or targeted marketing to those groups. So through that conversation, the idea surfaced to help them get to some very, very segmented and targeted groups that they could promote different loan types to try to kind of granularly, I don't know if that's a word, build, loan volume versus the blanket, hey, here's the current loan we're promoting and we send it out to everyone. So they were able to bring, that ability to get to the very narrow segments quickly was as a first step in efficiency. Because if you think about, again, without a solution like this, how a credit union would get to that, it would be extremely time consuming. And likely the data itself would get stale before they got that built. And some of the components Vertus can bring in, transaction mining, for example, you probably wouldn't even have a real efficient way to get to that yourself anyway. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is this particular credit union is using a generative AI copywriting tool that Vertus has available, so that once they defined all those segments across many different data points, for example, demographics or age demographics, generational life stages kind of thing. The generative AI copywriting tool is helping them create the copy for all of those campaigns that they want to run in those very narrow and targeted lanes. So again, think about if a marketing department had 7 or 8 different communications and things they needed to create around a single promotion. How much time would all that copy generation and everything take? And that tool can do it in a matter of minutes. And it does it with compliance checking in the background for both NCUA compliance and things like DEI, so that the credit union doesn't inadvertently put a message out there that might become problematic. So yeah, saves tons and tons of time. And then the third part is, because the data continues to feed into the system in real time, they have results at their fingertips. They can look back after this effort and say, okay, did we move the needle in these areas very, very easily and efficiently?
Wow. Well, I can give you data that shows how long it does take to create all those different campaigns.
I know you can.
I've been living it for for a number of years.
Yeah, yeah. And what it does, like I said, is it's moving the credit union away from what my marketing director at Lanco, I don't know if she made this up, but I love the phrase. She used to say spray and pray, right? Like spray and pray marketing that, which is traditionally is what a lot of us in credit unions have had to live with, right? We think about, well, we want to promote, I don't know, our credit card. So we come up with a campaign, and our data point is who doesn't have a credit card, right? And so you send that communication out to everybody, and within that group, you've probably hit people that have, for very good reason, have zero interest in your credit card. And on top of that, when you do that, this, like you kind of wasted your at bat, right, with that person because you sent them a completely irrelevant message. And so what being able to dig into this data does is really drive you toward that personalization so that what you're sending to the credit or to the member, hopefully is way more relevant to them than what we were able to do in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I always use the example, I have as you know, I have a daughter who is going to be going off to college. She'll be a senior this year. She'll be going off to college. I have yet to get any information on student loans, which is shocking to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if somebody's looking at my data and realizes I have a 17-year-old kid, they're gonna, like, you would think I would be in that grouping. And then they would tailor the message to me based on the parent and maybe tailor messaging to her as a student.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, exactly. It's a great use case, and it's the kind of thing that these solutions can make available. And it's interesting you bring that up because one of the things that we've seen so far with the Virtus AI partnership that I've never seen with other credit union vendors or partners is the way that they're adapting based on the feedback that they're getting from the credit unions on the solution. So as an example, just last week they did they do regular releases and updates to the platform, but they did a release that brought in, I think it was almost 40 new metrics of how members are participating with the credit union, that they make them usable as filters for data. So in your scenario, I'm trying to think if I've seen one of a student loan opportunity on the system or not. I can't recall, but that's great feedback that an organization like Virtus can take and say, yeah, let's look for that. Let's look for that connection and make that usable to the credit union so that, again, you're not sitting there trying to pull out tons and tons of data and correlate it and go, who's the parent and all that kind of stuff, that it just starts to bring that information to the table. So yeah, they really are proving to be a great partner for credit unions and just the way that they adapt and make the solution better and better.
Okay. Well, you had started with, personalization. So, member trust and personalization are kind of at the core of the credit union mission. So how does Virtus AI support this more human-centered experiences?
Yeah, it does it by bringing the data you want regarding the individual all together and giving you kind of a holistic view of the relationship that member has to the credit union. Across like the products they use, the services they use, the balances they're keeping in their accounts, all of that, loan balances and so on. And then along with that, they do what they call participation scoring.
Okay.
And so what that does is it takes your membership and it puts them into bands, A, B, C, D, E, or whatever, that shows you kind of what your most engaged members look like based on that holistic view. And what it gives you is the opportunity to say, okay, I see, what my A tier members, let's say, look like, my B, C, D. And within that, I can see kind of the product journey that those A members have taken and with the credit union. And so now I see, okay, I kind of see the pathway that drives engagement with our membership.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can start to then personalize the messaging and the marketing that I'm going to provide to those members in, say, the D and E tier to try to encourage more and more engagement with them. And I can, again, see how I'm doing with that. I can see whether or not there's movement between those levels. And just being able to quickly understand your engaged members versus your non-engaged, it really makes personalization start to become possible, because now I can see the individual, where they fit in terms of that engagement kind of matrix with the credit union, and it starts to become very actionable to know, okay, now I see how I want to try to encourage this person to move along the pathway at my credit union to becoming more engaged.
Okay. What have you learned from Vertus AI segmentation and modeling tools to deepen then the member engagement or anticipate their needs?
Yeah, so right on that same path, right? As I start to learn who my most engaged members are, what they look like, what that journey was to engagement. We do this as credit. I can fully admit, as CEO at Lanco, this was something that I did. We think we know. We think we know what our most engaged members look like, but oftentimes we're making a lot of assumptions to get there. And the data, again, that proves our theory about what we know or what we think we know, is oftentimes hard to access, time consuming. And so we may not always be able to prove out what we think that engagement looks like. So when you get into that data in a way that you can see who your best members are,
Mhm.
you can start to be able to more effectively, again, through that personalization, start getting to know the other members and how to move them into more engagement. And I would say I knew that inherently as a CEO, but I didn't know how easy it could be until I saw a solution like Vertus AI that puts it at your fingertips, that knowledge. And so, yeah, that really is key to it, is just being able to identify what the most engaged members look like who are participating with your credit union, what their behavior looks like, and then beginning to understand how to encourage that in other members. And that grows on to the point of being able to then look outside your credit union for individuals that might look like those most engaged people in terms of their financial behavior, and starting to market the credit union to them as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, I've been in meetings where, the person has said, well, we know our members, but this tool really helps you know your members, and
Right.
have
Yeah.
all that data at your fingertips.
Yeah. And like I said, I can freely admit that, you just are kind of forced, especially in a smaller mid-sized credit union sometimes, to make decisions and implement strategy on gut feeling or what we think we know, because you just haven't had the resources to prove it. And this can help you prove it. It's pretty cool.
So when introducing a tool like Vertus AI, what internal barriers have you seen that leaders should be prepared for?
Uh well, I hope I don't sound, yeah. I'll be careful how I answer this question. So, one is inertia, right? The way we've always done things. We maybe we don't need that because we've never needed it before. So, there's always that challenge, and that comes back to, like I said, time margin, right? Like we get so into the day to day, and how we've had to execute on life as a credit union, that sometimes it can be hard to stop and go, oh, I should check that out. So that's one thing. The other thing is, like I said, this information has not been at our fingertips as leaders. So. What I liken it to is, I've been using the analogy sometimes talking to people of, it's kind of like you learn to fly a plane in a Cessna, which is one of those little trainer planes, that people get their pilot license in. And then somebody, plops you down in a fighter jet and says, have at it. So there can be that, there's so much knowledge available to you through the solution, and it's so accessible that it can be a little bit intimidating at first. So sometimes when we work on demos with credit unions, I can see sometimes the anxiety growing a little bit, like, oh my gosh, what do I'm not even sure I know where to start with this tool. And so that's something to be prepared for, but I would encourage you not to be intimidated by, because the other end of it is, I've seen with our partner Vertus that they are not a tech company like so many that credit unions may experience, where they run you through a standard implementation process and hand you the keys to whatever came out of the box and walk away. That's just not how they are. So they're very adept and committed to getting credit unions over that hump of feeling like they are ready to run the fighter plane. And then some comparison to traditional marketing analytics. So a lot of times, especially marketers, they're quick to think, oh, I have data, and we do. We have data on engagement and response, click-throughs and all the things that you can get information on when you're doing digital marketing, especially. But this is different. That's great alongside the data you can get through something like Vertus AI that is really helping you understand the why behind the behaviors that might surface in the engagement metrics or the click-throughs and all of that. So there's sometimes that crops up where the marketing people, and it probably comes from, again, it's just a new way to look at it and a more massive amount of data than maybe they've been comfortable with. And then kind of the final thing is just getting the data in the solution in a way that they feel confident with. The data spec for Vertus AI is pretty light compared to some other solutions that people might look at. But there's still, especially in, again, small and mid-sized credit unions, sometimes there's some anxieties around, do we know how to use the reporting tool for our core the way we need to get the data out? Are we comfortable with the SFTP process, all of that? But Vertus AI has been very good at helping people through that process. And then the final piece is too, the accuracy. So sometimes anybody who's had large databases to work with knows that it's hard to keep the data accurate. And so, there's some of that too, like, okay, if I'm going to plug all this into a solution and learn from it, I need to make sure it's accurate. And maybe I look at that and go, we need to do a little cleaning up here before we start working on that. So those are kind of some of the hurdles or things to think about as you start to approach a solution like this. But like I said, I've been in this space over 25 years and had a lot of opportunity over those years to work with different vendors and understand them. And I can honestly say that Vertus AI has been one of the most responsive to member needs. They've been the most supportive, and kind of their method for helping credit unions through these challenges is really, really great. So,
okay. Which internal champions or roles at the credit union are essential to successfully integrate Vertus AI?
Well, I would say whoever is leading on strategy, so probably that's the CEO in most cases. But whoever leads on strategy needs to be at the table and bought into the idea, because that's the person that needs to learn the most from the data, right? And needs either to use the data to generate strategic direction and ideas, or to use the data to prove out or understand either the success or failure of those strategic ideas or directions. So that's the first person. The other is the marketing. The solution does such a great job of enabling you toward personalization in marketing that you want that marketing person bought in. And one of the things that I encourage credit unions to think about as they're looking at this, sometimes you talk about those hurdles or barriers to success maybe that some might face. One of them is the marketing muscles may be a little weak. Maybe they haven't committed as much energy to marketing as they should have, because, again, in the past, I don't have an efficient way to do it, right? Everything's spray and pray. If I want to do that by direct mail, that's really expensive, all that kind of thing. So there maybe isn't that drive or developed kind of marketing execution in some of the credit unions. And one of the things to think about in that regard with this solution is now you have the data there. If you haven't had that internally, you don't necessarily have to go get it internally. Maybe it's, you can pair the data solution through Vertus AI up with an external third-party marketing relationship and go from kind of some weakness in that area to some real strength. Because when you bring in, skilled data analytics and you pair that up with skilled marketing expertise, you put yourself in a position to, really be effective in personalization and targeted marketing. What's cool is the credit union can even bring, if they go out and they get that third-party marketing team to come on board, they can bring them to the solution. So the solution is single license for the credit union. It's web-based. It does not take PII information. So you can literally hand the keys to, the marketing team you hired and say, hey, look at our data, help us generate ideas, help us understand what we should be tackling. And so you can really level up quickly in your ability for marketing.
All right. So Jeremy, looking ahead, how can Vertus AI help credit unions grow in the long term?
I think, member penetration or penetration of the current member relationships is one. So I think most credit union leaders would admit that it's something we struggle with, is getting those member relationships to grow and deepen. When they do, that brings deposits, that brings new loan opportunity, that brings all the things within the existing membership that bring growth. So that ability to see what the engaged members look like, the journey they took to get there, and try to encourage others along that same path is really valuable for growth. Especially when you look at, if you're doing indirect lending, everybody knows that is the biggest challenge, to get somebody who comes to you through an indirect lending relationship to do anything but have that loan. And there's some metrics that show that Virtus has been able to move the needle for some credit unions on that. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's a silver bullet, because it's one of the toughest things to do, but it is a growth opportunity in credit unions, and being able to see what's working and see what you're trying to push those indirect relationships toward is hugely beneficial for growth. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing would be, like I said earlier, once you understand that about your existing membership and you get good at how you execute on your opportunities, then you're really positioning yourself to be able to go out into the broader market in the areas that you serve and find more people who look like, folks that would want to join your credit union and grow with it. And Virtus actually has a solution for that you can plug in. It's called Acquire. It goes out, they purchase a data set through, I believe it's Experian, and they bring that to the table, and through similar, metrics, the system has learned your membership at this point, right? And it understands kind of who you serve best. It can go into that purchase data set and present to you as a credit union, hey, out of the data set we purchased, here are the people who are most likely to join your credit union. Here are the ones within that set that are the most likely to grow in the relationship with the credit union. And here are the ways in which they're best engaged. So it really is a nice pathway to see credit unions pursue growth strategy. And again, with a single partner, so from the vendor management end of it, once you get into the relationship and you've done all that due diligence and all of that, and you've done your implementation, then you're off and running.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining me. Any final thoughts for our listeners today?
Yeah, just as it relates to AI, I guess, I know we've talked a lot about Virtus AI, but like I said earlier, there's a lot of ways AI-enabled solutions can plug into your credit union. So I think if there's a takeaway from the conversation, just start thinking about what those could be, because there's probably a solution coming for the need that you have. And like I said, start making that wish list like you and I talked about. So if you could give everybody in your shop a personal assistant, what would those people have them do? It's a good way to start making your list, and just encouraging people to think about. I hear a lot of things about AI and its relevance, and questioning, whether or not everything that's talked about. There's a ton of hype. I'll admit that, but the reality is, to me, I think if you look at AI and don't want to begin getting involved with it today, then it's really kind of equivalent of looking at the internet as a fad like 30 years ago. You know what I mean? Like there's that big of a change, and maybe even bigger coming. So I would just encourage people to just start engaging and thinking about how they could leverage it to the benefit of their credit union. Because again, as credit unions, it's something we've needed for a long time. We've all been wearing so many hats, too many hats, and have needed to put more people in the mix, but maybe haven't been able to do that from a budget perspective. And I want to get started on how, even if you could, how hard it is to find the right people, right? So just thinking of it that way, and not necessarily looking at it as like, oh, I could reduce my staff. The reality is I can augment my staff in a way that will make them more effective, because I can bring time back to the table for them. And my best people will be able to focus on helping us grow instead of just getting the job done every day. And that's the real growth opportunity, I think, with AI, and something I would encourage credit union leaders to be thinking about.
All right. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
All right. This episode of Financial Minds is brought to you by Vizo Financial's partner, Virtus AI. It's no secret that personalized member engagement can be costly. But what if you had the data at your fingertips that could tell you which of your members are most likely to be interested in specific product offerings based on their demographics and financial behaviors? Sounds pretty great, right? Through Vizo Financial's partnership with Virtus AI, you can. Virtus AI is a leading provider of member growth and marketing effective solutions for credit unions. Their solutions offer your financial institution a growth engine that provides AI-based personalized recommendations to grow participation and reduce churn. Vertus AI will meet you where you are at in your analytics journey and rapidly provide value with your existing data, no matter how big or small. For more information on Vertus AI, contact your Vizo Financial Corporate Account Manager today by emailing accountmanagers@vfccu.org. As always, thanks for listening and make it a great day.